Coming up, we're turning the mic over to Jacksonville land development expert and president of Southern Impression Development, Daniell Blanchard. But first, a tasty musical treat from one of Jacksonville's very own Firewater Tent Revival. Hello, Jacksonville. I'm your host, Ian Brown, and this is the Jacksonville Commercial Real Estate Show, where we bring you dynamic local entrepreneurs, deal makers, and thought leaders ready to dive deep and unpack the local commercial market so you can invest with greater confidence and accelerate your own success. This show is lovingly produced by yours truly and Yield Coach Capital. To stay up to date on Jacksonville's nuanced commercial real estate market, events, and investment opportunities, go to investwiththecoach.com and join the team. All right, today I am here with Daniell Blanchard. He is president of Southern Impression Development, a friend and a colleague. Happy to have him aboard. Daniell, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ian. Glad to be here.
Awesome. All right, we're going to dive right into it. I kind of start with a burning question. As a developer of multifamily in Jacksonville, what is the biggest obstacle to solving the housing shortage and related affordability issues in Jacksonville?
You know, affordability is a tough topic these days. The market's changed a lot in the last 20 or 30 years. 20 years ago, we would go out and look for a land opportunity, and I would knock on Farmer Joe's door, and he'd say, you're the third person to knock on my door in the last year. So yeah. And now we go and knock on that guy's door, and he says, you're the 53rd person to knock on my door in the last year, So there's certainly a lot of competition, and a lot of the big builders are in the game. There's a lot of people that are looking for the same pieces of dirt. So there's a lot of competition that naturally drives up the prices of the land. But as far as the development side on residential and commercial, I think one of the biggest challenges that I see out there is how the rules have continued to evolve, and I think there's a little too much government in development these days, and the rules are just getting tougher and tougher and more strict. And it's not all bad. Some of it's needed, and I get that, but a lot of it's excessive. And I think that you've got some special interests along the way that put their vote in, and let's have 5-foot sidewalks, let's have 6-foot sidewalks. Let's make it 8. Let's put them on both sides of the street, and, we like landscape. We need more. And so it just, you get all these rules that just layer and layer. And so what you're seeing in residential and commercial, but especially in residential, is the cost of the lot as a percentage of the overall home is drastically increasing, where 50 years ago, the cost of the lot may have been 10, 12%. Now it's 20, 25, 30% of the cost of this. So you're seeing $300,000 houses where you've got $100,000 in the lot. And that's something new and unheard of. And that's a little lopsided. And so that's one of the issues. And there's a lot of forces pushing from the government regulation about, the infrastructure and the pipe and how we do, drainage and things, but all in all, if you package all that together, it's just a lot of little things coming together to drive up those costs, including the cost of the dirt from Farmer Joe, and you just got runaway lot costs on commercial and residential development. Those finished lots are just off the chart in the expense these days. It's just huge number.
So, from what you're saying, the dirt pricing is driving the end product higher than even I know lumber isn't what it used to be. It's come down, but not so much the sticks and bricks and construction and labor, but more of you see the dirt playing a huge impact in the overall cost of the final product.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I think that the cost of the finished lot is disproportionately increasing as opposed to the cost of the construction. So construction's going up too. I mean, they've got labor and insurance, and lumber is off the chart, and you've got shortages of supplies and shingles and drywall from time to time, and it all switches and cycles. But that's going to happen, and that's been unfortunate. But I think the bigger impact has been the cost of that finished lot, whether that's the dirt or the infrastructure. It's really pushing prices up disproportionately on the finished product. So it's been tough for commercial and residential.
We've had a couple of guests on so far this year that spoke about areas within Northeast Florida that they target development, areas that they avoid, areas that are more difficult than others. I mean, you mentioned in your top four, land prices and competition, government interference, the percentage of a finished lot, infrastructure cost. On that government interference topic, number two there, I feel like Duval has a pretty good reputation as being fairly pro-development. We're both aware of, changes in the past 6 months or so, but we've enjoyed this, better part of a decade of kind of a rising tide of development, brought a lot of housing online, put a lot of housing in the pipeline. Like, what are your thoughts on Duval? This is the Jacksonville Commercial Real Estate Show. Duval as a pro-development county, as it, compare and contrast to maybe some other nearby areas.
Um, Fair question. I think that there are definitely a lot of other municipalities that are more difficult. I think they're all difficult. So I don't want to say that it's easier to develop in Jacksonville, but maybe I'll say that it's less bad.
Gotcha.
And we can. I think that the city has been relatively helpful in getting things done, getting things through, and there's always room for improvement. But I've got some more stories from some other cities across the state and down south and into Georgia that just are mind-boggling. So it's always tough. Development gets tougher and tougher over the years everywhere. But I think Jacksonville does okay. Definitely some room for improvement here and there, but they tend to listen more and they've done a pretty decent job in the city of Jacksonville of serving the builder and developer community.
Now, Daniell, Southern Impression Development, your company, what do you guys specialize in?
Well, we at Southern Impression, we do a lot of build to rent, and Chris Funk is my partner and runs the home building side, and so he's building a lot of the quads and the duplexes and some small apartment complexes, and just build to rent product all across the state for us and for other clients. And so on my side of the equation, what I do is the development. So I do everything from that first meeting with Farmer Joe, potentially for acquisition, due diligence, acquisition entitlements, rezonings, all the preparation, and then all the actual development. We engage the civil contractors to come in and develop the site, do the infrastructure, water, sewer, drainage, ponds, and deliver it over to the home builders essentially, or the multifamily builder, and have it pad ready, lot ready, fountain spraying water, hardscape in, landscape up, signage out front, ready to go.
Okay. So all the horizontals are within your scope as well.
Everything horizontal related, from acquisition all the way through completion of the infrastructure. Absolutely.
And just for reference, can you name a couple of projects that might be familiar to an audience, things you've worked on in Jacksonville?
Well, we built Panther Creek recently, which is that's one of the bigger communities that we've done in Jacksonville. Panther Creek, we put maybe a little over 800 lots on the ground there. It's off of Chafee Road. That has won some awards in the last few years for affordability. And it's amazing to see how fast that community absorbed. I mean, it just shows you that there's an enormous lack of supply of affordable product, and it's getting harder and harder to find. And so we sold some lots to some of the big builders that you would know, and then we built some with our home building side here, and just a fantastic community. Also, we're building a lot of smaller communities that are quadruplex, duplexes, things like that, because it is hard to find those big chunks of land where you can go and build 800 single family lots. All the builders want single family lots, and they're really hard to get. And so the only way to get affordability these days is density. And so you're seeing more and more duplexes and townhomes and quads and creativity and trying to help get that land cost down from such a huge percentage of the overall product down to something that's more manageable to help add affordability to the end buyer or end renter.
It does seem like the new starter home for, a young professional in their 20s, it's very likely not the 3-2 on a 50, 60, 70-foot lot with a two-car garage. It's much more likely to be a townhome product or something more dense, maybe a paired villa, something that has a little less land demand on the developer.
Yeah, and how it's amazing how much that's changed just in the last 15 years. Because 15 years ago, it was that 3-2 on a 50-foot lot, which was kind of looked at as a small lot now. And so now we're trying to do 40 footers and 30 footers, and the mix of product is broad, but townhomes. I mean, we're seeing entry level townhomes out there in some spots in the city at $300,000, and that's a big number. I mean, and so yeah, so I think you're seeing more people wait perhaps and rent. And so that's part of the reason that the whole build to rent concept has flourished is because um, there's that barrier to entry for the buyer is so high, but for the tenant it's much lower, and they can get in and transition out or wait till they've got enough money to buy a home. And so yeah, so that first time home buyer, it's a tough time for them out there right now. It really is.
So I have some familiarity with your build for rent product. Now, what would be a typical size? Let's say you do like your quadruplex development, and that would be, for clarification, that would be multiple quadruplexes.
Sure.
What would be like a typical site size and a typical project size for one of like your quadruplex communities?
Uh, it's small sites are tough. You don't get the efficiency that you get on the bigger sites, but the bigger sites are hard to get. So so there's kind of a sweet spot there where it starts to work, and we're seeing sites that are maybe 5 acres and up is where they start to become possible for a quad or duplex community. We've built a few that have been smaller than that have just been a couple of acres, and we squeezed in a couple buildings, and they're tough. They're just tough to make it work financially unless the dirt is real cheap. Those tend to not work. And then you get some issues with, and we talked about government intervention and the hurdles that are layered on by the municipality and the service providers and things. You know, are the lift station requirements in Jacksonville are enormous. And so for JEA, if you've got a lift station, they want you to have this big fancy lift station that's, maybe $800,000 and can serve 100, 200, 300 houses. And even if you've only got 10 houses, you got to build that. And so there's just not enough houses to spread that cost around. And so it makes some of the smaller sites really, really tough to develop depending on where the utilities are and what's available and things like that. So we've got some quad communities that we've built here that have we've got one I think that has 11 quads at 44 units. We've got one off of the West Lake. I think that one had 36 quads, something like that. Over 100 units. And we've got some others in other parts of the state, Ocala and so on, that have, maybe 50 or so quads each. And you really can get some efficiency in pricing when you do that. And those small ones are just real tough.
Now let's take that quad community, 11 quads, 44 units, give or take. Is that something where you would sell the quadruplex to an investor, or you just rent out 44 units in a build for rent type model?
Sure. Well, some of the BTR guys are taking neighborhoods with, say, 100 townhomes and renting them all and treating it like an apartment complex. And so that is something new that that inventory we talked about for that first time buyer, that maybe that retail wouldn't go as fast, but someone who's got deep pockets like the BTR company can come in, buy them all, put all that inventory on the market, make it available as a rental product. So that's certainly something that's out there that's unique. But let me rewind. Tell me your question again.
Well, I know that you do these, like a sea of quadruplex. I shouldn't say sea,
Yeah.
but like all
Oh,
these quadruplexes, this community, and I know you kind of have this like flexible disposition in a way because I believe I've seen you do them where each quad is its own parcel ID, and you throw them under like a master management, and people can buy a quad. Can you speak to that?
right. So not only are you seeing the townhomes that I just mentioned, where instead of being sold individually, they're selling in bulk. You're seeing the opposite too, where we're building all of these quads and putting a quad on an individual lot in a community, almost like you would a single family home. And so we can take those individual quads and sell them to a variety of different investors. And so Fannie Mae, and certainly not an expert on the retail financing side, but Fannie Mae has got some changes recently in how they address quadruplexes and those loans, where you can be that owner tenant and buy a quad and live in one and rent three. And some of the down payments are really small. So traditionally, we've sold to more wealthy investors those individual quads, and now you're seeing more of the potential occupant investor, and so that market's growing. And having quads and individual lots is something that's a little bit unique and doesn't always fit into the existing zoning categories in some of the municipalities. And so we've got to be creative and try and make that work. But it's just one more example of how the market is evolving to help affordability. I mean, it change has got to happen. And, that's one way to get there is the way that we're doing it with the quads and, the townhome strategy. And there's a lot of different ways out there that people are trying to find that sweet spot, because it is just so darn tough to get affordability.
And I think your product with, we'll stick with that 11 quads community you did, to have a product where like maybe a younger investor that's, thinking, okay, I could look for something in Mandarin or South Side or West Side, wherever I want. Maybe I need to buy a townhome, but then they stop and think, well, I could go get a high leverage owner occupied loan, buy, a Southern Impression quad product, brand new. And, it's like it's like being a landlord with a little bit of training wheels. Nothing should break. You still have to place tenants, but get those tenants to kind of start amortizing your debt and get you in your first investment, kind of like that bigger pockets house hack type start. So I think it's cool. You guys are the only group that I'm aware of building a product like that and then allowing an investor to come and buy the 4-unit quadruplex on its own parcel ID within a matching community. So you're right. You could have the high net worth individual that just likes it as an investment. Then you might have the younger investor who can go in there and house hack. So, and it qualifies for all your conventional residential financing. So I think it's great. On that topic, Daniel, I mean to cut you off, but like in Jacksonville, when you go from, this answer much better than I do. When you go from, like, let's say I want to build a duplex, I go to, I used to actually do this, drive around Murray Hill, look for some sites. Okay, that one I can maybe squeeze a duplex on. When you go from a 2-unit attached to a 3 or 4, what happens in the code and development? I believe that triggers some things in Jacksonville.
Sure. And I've had some debates with different municipalities about how they address the infrastructure when you go from 3 to 4. I even sat down with some folks in Jacksonville from the fire marshal's office and argued the fire code. Didn't win, but so here's how they interpret it. It is, if you have let's say a townhome, for example, if you've got a 4-unit townhome building, townhomes typically don't have to have fire suppression. If that 4-unit townhome building was identical and was only on one parcel, you have to have fire suppression, even though it's the exact same structure, right?
Yep.
Does that make sense? I don't know, but that's the rule. And so fire suppression happens at 4 units typically, and there's a lot more to it than just that. But it's really expensive. You've got to have the sprinkler system and the controls and the wires and the valves and the extra lines in the street, and so and also when you hit to from 3 to 4 units, or the jump from 2 to 4, you get some commercial standards where you got to have parking lot and ADA compliance and different setbacks, and so there's a lot that goes to it in that leap from 2 to 4. And so a lot of times, if you've got a parcel like a little one that, like you were mentioning, if you look at doing a duplex or doing a quadruplex, it's so expensive to take that jump to quad. You're probably better off doing a duplex. But if you can build 10 or 20 of them, then all of a sudden you can get the efficiency to make that leap make sense.
When I lived in Murray Hill, I was near Fish River Brewery, and the lot across from me was just vacant and treed, slightly oversized, and you could legally do, I think I could get 4 units on there legally without any zoning work. But just like you're talking about, the project gets treated as if I'm building an apartment essentially with this, fire suppression and setbacks. Yeah. Versus if I just do a duplex, they're going to treat that, for conversational purposes, they're going to treat that just like a standard one-off single family home application.
Right. Yeah. They would treat that duplex like a single family home, and you'd have those construction standards. But if you're building a quad, it's essentially an apartment complex. And then the standards and the thresholds are so much higher. Very expensive.
When you think about these guys and gals that are trying to get into investing, and a lot of people, the first thing that they can imagine doing is a residential rental. I think it just makes sense to a lot of people. We live in housing. I could rent out a room. I could rent out a unit. So these small properties are popular for like entry-level investors. But then you look around and a lot of them only exist in construction times before today's code. So old stuff in San Marco, old stuff in St. Nicholas and Springfield, Riverside, Murray Hill, Avondale. And I've personally lived and operated through some of those deals, and they can get pretty challenging. So now you have old mechanicals, old infrastructure, old construction. And, so here you are, an entry-level investor, you buy a quad in Springfield or Murray Hill or Riverside, and all of a sudden you're surprised, I didn't realize this thing has to be rewired and replumbed. And and my HVAC has weird configuration, and my crawl space is all damp. And before you know it, you're like, oh my God, I barely had enough money for the down payment. And now I have, 6 figures in CapEx on what was a small investment. Then you start to kind of compare that. You look around, you're like, well, where can I find something new? And that's where your Southern Impression product caught my eye a few years ago, where it's like, you're one of the only groups in town that I'm aware of building a newer quadruplex product that somebody could come in and invest just in 4 units, or they could buy the whole darn community, I presume, if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take them all. Yeah. So,
Right.
well, on this topic of Jacksonville and growth, I'm from Jacksonville. I know you've been here. If you weren't born here, I know you've been here most of your life.
Long time. Yeah.
Long time. So I found out when my kids were born in St. Vincent's, Riverside, when my second was born there, my mom just casually mentioned, oh, you were born here too. Like, oh, all this time I didn't know the hospital I was born in. I live like 3 blocks from it. So from Jacksonville, and there is kind of like this a bit of a native pessimistic attitude towards, I think, growth, exposure to the city, development, traffic, blah, 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 headaches, a little bit of this NIMBY attitude. And I feel like in NIMBY, not in my backyard. Unfortunately, in my opinion, a lot of that is from like the native population. The people that come here, a lot of people that move or migrate here, they come from markets that are like faster paced, more saturated, already have their growth, already have their exposure. So I'm not sure there's a direct question in there, but just kind of like how that's affected. I mean, you've been a developer in Northeast Florida for coming up on 25 years. Like, I guess my question would be, do you notice what I'm observing, like the old guard, some of the old residents just being just resistant, a more NIMBY attitude?
Yeah. And I hate it, but it just is what it is. I don't know how to change it or talk sense into people, but yeah, I think it's both. So the people that move here say, they move here because they like it, and they go, now that I've got it, I don't want anybody to change it. I've got my piece. No, let's not build anymore. let's not build a neighborhood exactly like mine across the street because I like looking at the woods there, you know. But yeah, I think that the folks that have seen it for so many years, you know, the natives or folks that have grown up, growth is tough. You know, it's something that people always complain about, the you know, the traffic and the people, but you got to live somewhere. You know, everybody lives in a house. There's people moving to Florida just in droves every day. And, you know, you look at how things have changed over the last 20 years, 50 years. I mean, that's just part of development. I mean, everyone, the public's nearby. They love all the stores and the shopping and the things. They want affordable housing. They want all of those things, but they want it in a bubble where nobody else can have it. And that's just unrealistic. So in order to get those things, you've got to have the growth. You've got to have the communities. Farmer Joe on one side of the road deserves to sell his property and put houses there, just like the guy did on the other side of the road. And, you know, growth is going to continue all across the great state of Florida into the future. It's just part of it.
And I do feel like, you know, there's people that have larger tracts of land inside the Beltway. Utilities are right there, you know, on their yard, and they don't understand that somebody may want to come in here and put a community or a subdivision or townhomes or an apartment. And it's just, that's the thing. We have a Beltway, we have surrounding areas, but growth is going to put, luckily we do have a lot of land other than east where you can go. And if you want to live more of like an agricultural existence, I would encourage you to move further than you think if you'd like to, you know, preserve that way of life for decades. But, you know, what do you think is drawing, you know, Jacksonville's not, we're kind of an island in a way, not literally, but we have this Northeast Florida is a large, you know, our MSA, I believe, is over 1.6 million. I don't know, you know, we're kind of our own animal. I get calls from investors and they're like familiar with Orlando, Tampa, maybe further south and like Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Naples, or on the other side of the state, like West Palm, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, but they don't know much about Jacksonville. Do you feel like we, and you're further ahead of me on this, but do you feel like we enjoy like a native benefit more than other cities because Jacksonville's a little bit geographically isolated from the rest of Florida?
Yeah, you know, Jacksonville doesn't necessarily have that thing that we're famous for. I mean, it's a good city. 100 years ago it was banking. I mean, it was the banking headquarters of the Southeast, really. And over the years, you know, you see, you know, Tampa maybe had their port, and Miami has got their thing. Orlando's Disney, and so we're one of the bigger cities, but it's a little nebulous. People can't quite put their finger on it. And in a way that, you know, that maybe that's good because it hasn't branded us as any one thing and given more opportunities for different lines of business and growth and opportunities within the market, and sometimes gets looked over, but not anymore. I think people are really taking a hard look at Jacksonville, and affordability and climate is a huge thing these days. You know, the political climate's a huge thing these days. And so I think that Jacksonville really has a really bright future. And, you know, there's a tremendous opportunity that we've got here with the, you know, some of the pricing and some of the challenges that maybe the bigger cities have that we don't have yet. So I think it's a great place to continue to grow and do business in right now.
You know, I feel like we're at an interesting point in the site in this real estate cycle, and this is probably a topic for a different time and a different podcast. But you know, right on the brink of when you would expect us to have possibly strong headwinds or maybe a legitimate recession with COVID, all of a sudden we have, you know, the t-shirt cannon comes firing off, 3, 4, whatever it is, $1 trillion, and nobody has to work and everybody's fat and happy and ready to renovate their homes or buy a new home, and rates are, you know, 2.5% and life is good. What, you know, it's just, I'm partly just speaking out loud, but I kind of wonder, you know, are there some lessons people could learn that, you know, you've got 24 plus years in the saddle looking at cycles, boom and bust and development. And, you know, I'm still fairly aggressive in what I'm pursuing here in Jacksonville, but cautious. I did appraise through the downturn in the fall of 2008 and beyond. But, I have to admit, I'm still in the deal making community. I'm still looking to put things together. I still do have faith in what we're going to be doing tomorrow, a month from now, hopefully a year from now. But, you have a longer lens, a longer perspective than I do. So what are your thoughts on, development cycles in Jacksonville?
Sure. And, I certainly don't have all the answers, but, I've made mistakes and seen things along the way. And, you know, a couple things. One is the market can change very, very quickly. And, that wasn't always the case 20, 30, 40 years ago. And now with the internet, technology, and sort of the pace of business is much, much faster than it used to be. And so with that comes some exposure and risk. And as the market has the ability to change very quickly, sometimes it does. And so like with the recession in '08, you see almost overnight things like recreational vehicles, Winnebago, the stocks tank, and people aren't shelling out money for those things anymore. And those business lines just go to hell in a handbasket. And there's also the unknown risk out there, like COVID comes, and we think, gosh, what is this going to do? And it's a wild card. So there's always the wild card out there that creates the risk. And who would have thought, in COVID, the opposite happened for folks like Winnebago. Their stocks like tripled because everybody wants to buy an RV because they don't want to stay in a hotel room because you're going to get COVID, or and home improvement went through the roof. House prices went up. I mean, it's just hard to predict that market exposure, and so I see people that get really branded into certain business lines, and I think that you've got to have the ability to turn on a dime in this market. We look at the build to rent things that we've done, and how we're neck deep in that market. That market really didn't exist 5 years ago. So you've got to be poised to jump in or pull out pretty quickly, because the market risk can really bite you. That market can leave you behind in a heartbeat, and you've also got to be ready for the unknown. And even look at just in the last week or two, you've got the boat hit the bridge and collapse. And so imagine if you're the industrial guy on the wrong side of that bridge in that port. How does that affect him? What about the guy to the next port to the north? How is his business increasing because of it? And so there's always the wild card out there and you can't control, but you've got to be poised to take advantage of it, or to mitigate your risk because of all those unknowns. Because as soon as you think you've got it all figured out, you don't.
Mm-hmm. I did. I was just at a NAOP luncheon right before we hit record. You're aware of this, but the economist that spoke he mentioned that ship hitting that Baltimore bridge, and he said, so like in Jacksonville, I guess we would have a tugboat generally guiding a ship like that, but it hit regardless. That boat did not have a tugboat. It went right into the main pillar of that bridge. And he said that may be upwards of 40, 50,000 jobs immediately lost because of what cannot happen industrially in transacting with that port. And he also said they may never recover from it because you have competing ports that can now start to absorb those contracts and absorb those shipments. And to your point, just this weird black swan event. Boom, ship goes unguided, goes dark, runs right into a bridge. People die, and their economy is, Baltimore has its own issues, but they certainly didn't need that. And now that port might be forever trying to catch back up to where it was.
And, similar things happen, that directly affect the real estate business all the time. The crazy things like the cost of lumber going up, or, years ago with Chinese drywall, or shortage of shingles. We had window shortages a few years ago. We've got houses built that can't deliver because there's no windows, and so the windows are boarded up with wood, but the house is done. So there's always that wild card and that exposure and risk, and you just got to prepare for it to the best of your ability, and be ready to turn on a dime if you have to.
And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I was a young man in my 20s appraising right in that downturn. I had about 1.5 years of like the go-go days 2007, we were doing like appraisals for almost every bank. I was doing a lot of hotel work, non-recourse, non-recourse. I believe there was a 90-10 LTV product out there, non-recourse. I'd go meet the hotel developer. He's already driving that really curvy new Mercedes, probably on the first construction draw, and they would get sold usually off of like a rendering, just waiting for that CO, and then boom, they're sold. And I looked at, I mean, I was a history major. I'm just learning all this stuff so fast. And I'm looking at my boss like, is this normal? And he's like, no, this is going to end soon. And he was right. And then I did quite a few years of appraising through the downturn up until about, I stopped appraising in about 2014. And, but my point is, so many people that saw themselves as like infallible and like totally insulated, like had a financial moat. That moat was not deep enough. They were not insulated, and they ate it,
Yeah, yeah. I was certainly a part of that too when, the our business went all to hell in '07 or so, and development just dried up. And so the good thing is I had money in the stock market, but guess what? That all dried up too. That everything went all to hell at once. And so, you just got to be ready to turn on a dime and try to mitigate and limit liability and risk the best you can. And it's hard because sometimes you got to take risks to make money, but there's a tough balance out there, but you got to have your eyes open for sure.
So I've been asking any of the guests that I have that are, that have an asset class or a focus in Jacksonville, I ask this question. So for you, let's stick with kind of that build for rent. I know you do a few different products, but 2024, we're recording this in April. What do you kind of see as like your outlook? I know it's an election year, which makes things a little bit crazy. The Economist today at lunch, he does not believe we're going to have rate cuts. He thinks that they got ahead of themselves announcing those rate cuts. But I'm just literally reporting the news from today's luncheon. But 2024, do you see it kind of like a 2023? Do you see it, what do you see for, I can't expect you to look forward 5 years, but kind of what do you think for maybe the next year?
Well, we need some rate cuts, Ian. It's got to happen. So hopefully later this year we'll see some.
Okay.
And I think it's important to the market. If we don't, the market will still continue and it'll plug along. But the risk is that people need places to live, and there's certainly a shortage, but you're getting to a point where they can't afford them either. So what's going to give, So the inventory is going in. Everyone's trying to build more and more affordable, apartments and units. And so that's still going strong. But gosh, if the rates don't come down, there's certainly some exposure there that you get too many apartments that you can't rent. But at the same time, you've got the people that want to be in them. So what a weird time that would be. But I think that, God forbid, I don't see any traumatic event or something crazy happening in the next year, but you never know. So hopefully we'll see a few rate decreases, and the market will continue, and we'll build more and more. Margins will come up a little bit, and we'll get some folks in some great new affordable housing that need to be in it.
I tend to think that even if rates don't come down, especially at the affordable level, not as you move up the economic food chain, but maybe there will just be some look what we've had, a rise of a lot of programs over the past handful of years. So it's like, I've seen there might be some new loan programs that are just for the people that go into your first time homeowner, or kind of the entry level position, because I feel like a lot of what you see, let's go to strict multifamily just for a moment. What you saw a lot of was either like subsidized locally, that might be like a Vestcor type deal, or one of their competitors with like a LIHTC or tax credit. So you can see some of that penciling out. Or conversely, you would see on the opposite end of the spectrum, large class A, South Side town center type stuff. So, but that's a big gap in between. There's a big gap between like Vestcor, LIHTC type stuff and class A, Gate Parkway type stuff. So,
well, enormous gap. Yeah, I mean, you're right. It just enormous gap. But the other thing is, the sort of rent assisted product out there, or these, special loan programs, or, all these great ideas, they put so few units on the market, a couple hundred units here or there. It's like throwing a deck chair off the Titanic, it's still going down. So, it's great and it helps a little bit, but I think it's more sweeping change that we need, and it's hard to put your finger on what that is. Other than rates coming down and markets getting better. I mean, it's hard to get government out of the way, and so maybe there's some broader changes that can happen, maybe as it relates to allowing more density in some of the land that's out there, without having to go through these painful rezonings and things. And the Live Local Act that DeSantis took a shot at that a year or so back, and helped somewhat. But then you see, as an example, you see government or related entities do dumb things that they don't understand how it negatively impacts affordability of home ownership. And so, like JEA recently, their meter fees went from about $2,500 for a water sewer connection on a new home to about 11,000. Virtually overnight. They'll say, "Oh, well, we tiered it over 6 months, whatever, whatever." So when we're here fighting, or when a builder's out there fighting over, saving $50 on a light fixture and trying to get this affordability down, and then somebody like JEA just throws a grenade in the middle of it and says, "Hey, here's a $10,000 increase." And what that does for the tenant is, I mean, that's almost an instant $60 a month price increase, right? So now that unit went up, $10,000. That money's got to come from somewhere, and so it's either the first time home buyer or the buyer that's sort of financing that in, or if it's a build to rent product, it gets built into the rent, and that's $50-$60 a month, 10 grand. So it's they're not doing the things, they're not being thoughtful enough on how these things affect the affordable buyer and the continued growth. And that money should have come from the rates and the consumption fees, but that's unpopular to increase the cost of water and sewer. And so, because they haven't collected the reserves and replacement dollars that they needed and for growth, and that's their mistake. They should have done those things and didn't do it. And so, instead of making everybody pay a little bit, they make the next guy pay a bunch, and that's wrong. And so that's what we see in some of these impact fees, and all of those things collectively are just driving house costs through the roof. And I think that's somewhere that we need to focus on over the next 5 years, try and get those things down, get them out of the way, and not just sit back and hope and pray that rates come down. But if we can get these government entities and the utility providers to stop doing crazy things on fees, I think it'll help a lot.
I hope everybody backs it up and listens to that last 5 minutes, because that was great. I'm going to leave it at that. That was a perfect little capstone on affordability. All right, we're going to jump into closing questions. Daniel, why do you love Jacksonville?
Oh, Ian, I love Jacksonville because you're here, Ian.
Oh,
No, Jacksonville's been great. I mean, it's a great place to do business. You're in the great state of Florida, good climate, good people. We've got the water and the fun in the sun, and some pretty good infrastructure here. And Jacksonville's been good to me. No complaints, and certainly enjoyed it for a long time.
Awesome. How about a favorite local restaurant?
Oh, Ian, I'm getting fat. I don't know. There's so many of them. We've got a lot of great places. I'm trying to get lean and mean, but it's hard to say no to a good steak at Calford.
Do you go for that tomahawk?
That's no, man. The Spinellis is the way to go. If you haven't had it, you got to try it. So.
Okay, my buddy got the tomahawk on his birthday, and that thing was offensively large, but I think he made it through. I was impressed. So straight to the cardiologist afterwards.
Anything that's going to give me the meat sweats, and you got to roll me out in a wheelbarrow, I probably shouldn't be eating it.
Yeah, you got to eat it on the rooftop. Make sure there's some wind blowing, cool you down. All right, your favorite place or venue in Jacksonville?
Oh gosh, man, I don't know. I don't know that I have one. I think that I enjoy the kind of the more of the environment stuff that we've got here. I enjoy being on the water. I enjoy
Mhm.
the coast and the water and the intercoastal and all things related. I think that's something that sometimes we take for granted that, many places they don't have anything like that. And what a great asset that we've got here in our community. And I just enjoy being out on the water.
And one day I hope to get invited on that new boat. I want to cruise our waterways with you.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll
Yeah,
see.
we'll see. We'll see. Don't get ahead of yourself, Brown. All right, Daniel. Lastly, where can people connect with you and find out more about you?
Well, and I appreciate that. The short commercial plug is that, Southern Impression is available to help people with their due diligence needs, with development, to help them go from their land all the way from Farmer Joe all the way through, complete development with infrastructure in place. And we do that for a lot of different clients, some big clients and some little clients. Some of the big builders use us and some of the build to rent guys too. But the best way to reach me is probably by email. We don't do a lot of advertising, but we'd like to have some new clients, and we'd like to continue to grow and do the development that we do for other folks across the state. So email at Daniell at southernimpression.dev as in development. And then call me on the cell phone, 904-237-7781. And
Man,
we've
it
got,
took me like 3 years to get that cell phone number, and you just put it out like that.
yeah. But man, we've got, a website that shows all the great things we do and all that's great too. But, take a look at that but love to hear direct from people and we can help you get through the development process and help guide you with some due diligence and help other people get lots on the ground and keep things moving in the great state of Florida.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, my man.
Ian, thanks. Great seeing you and I appreciate the conversation. Enjoyed it.
All right. All right, everybody. Please rate, follow, and review on whatever platform you're enjoying this show. It makes a huge difference for us, allows us to bring you high quality guests like Daniel today. As I mentioned at the top of the show, go to investwiththecoach.com to never miss a networking, investment, or educational opportunity. If you're into scrolling, we are Yield Coach on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And that's a wrap on this Jacksonville Commercial Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Ian Brown, signing off and reminding everybody to lace up and leave it all on the field. Yield Coach out.